Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them. My name is Nicholas Zard, and I am your host on today's very special episode because, as you might have noticed behind me, we don't have the same background as usual. That's because we have our very first sponsor, and as you can probably see behind, it's called AeroAuto. And that name should ring a bell because we had Sean Borman, the CEO and founder of the company, a few months ago, telling us a little bit about what AeroAuto does. And so I'm very excited for this first official announcement that we have our first sponsor. So thank you very much for all of you making this podcast so unique and possible. By the way, we are now going up to 930 downloads, which is absolutely phenomenal considering that it's only been 11 months. It's a very niche market for innovative mobility solutions. And that, hey, this helps us pay for this microphone, this video, this laptop, the lighting around here, and of course, Buzzsprout, which distributes on all of your favorite podcasting platforms out there, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and so many more, as well as, of course, YouTube. So thank you for making this podcast such a success. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, the team from AeroAuto, for believing in us. And in fact, I have to share this story right now. Sean was so excited after our first interview appearing as a guest on this platform that he said, "You made it so easy. You made it so much fun that I want to contribute. I want to sponsor your show." And so we decided, hey, let's sponsor 4 interviews from your 4 top people and talk a little bit about what you're doing at AeroAuto. So without further ado, we're going to introduce Charles Kestenbaum, who is a board member of AeroAuto. I have to laugh because every time Charles and I talk, we talk for hours. He's one of those people like Rex Alexander, Clinton Harper. It's just, we talk a lot. And the reason why Charlie talks a lot is because he has such a wealth of information, an incredible background, an incredible professional history that stems all the way back to the early 70s when he left the United States to go travel abroad, as he says, dropped out of college and tuned into a very different world, but that opened up a world of eventually working with embassies in the Middle East, representing U.S. interests, the commercial U.S. interests, and became an NBC correspondent during the war in Lebanon. So our conversation really goes in lots of many different directions. So depending on where you're seeing this, you will see 2 versions of it. Now, the free version I'm going to put on Buzzsprout and YouTube is going to be the edited version because a lot of the stories that he talks about may not be specifically designed for advanced mobility, but they do give you really good insight as to why Charlie is so important in the role that he plays with AeroAuto, especially sitting on the board, because of the wealth of information he brings in from a geopolitical and an international business point of view, having dealt with a lot of different things out there. I will reserve the uncut version, which is over an hour, on our Patreon site, where you can further help us to keep the content of this podcast free and the high quality caliber that we've had so far. We still have a few people that we need to interview. We've got enough to go through next year. But as always, if you happen to know someone who works in the innovative mobility world, whether it's on water, electric, maritime, on rail, in the EV world, in the electric vehicle world, and of course in the advanced air mobility industries, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you. As always, continue to like, continue to subscribe, and continue to share. There are people out there who wonder, what are those flying cars they're talking about? What are those air taxis that they're talking about? Every time I travel, people ask me, is that ready? And well, the answer is yes, it's ready. The technology is ready, and we're waiting on certifications and regulatory bodies to prove that it is safe. So we want to hear more from you guys. What do you think all these innovative mobility solutions are? What are the promises of advanced air mobility for our ever so converging mobility transportation world? What do you think is happening? What would you like to see happen? So all of these questions we're going to try to answer. But without further ado, now we need to talk. Let Charlie introduce himself. Let Charlie talk about why AeroAuto has such a unique proposition value in this industry, why it's offering a sort of a place where you can go and see these aircraft up close, get in them, see and sense them to see how it will work. Kind of a show floor kind of place where you can see cars, where you can see boats and airplanes. This is going to be the place where you can go and eventually fly in these aircraft once they will be able to let us fly. And also, he's going to talk about a few things that we can finally now talk about. It's almost public. Well, at least it is now, but they will be buying an airport in North Tampa. And I'm very excited about the airport because that airport has everything to make AeroAuto a success. So once again, thank you, Sean, for your sign of encouragement, for your kudos. We will explain a little bit more about what AeroAuto, and we'll let Charlie take over. In the meantime, thank you for being such great patrons, and check us out on Patreon also. Thank you. Well, hey, Charlie, welcome to the Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions. Please tell us a little bit about who is Charlie?
I'm a bit of a confusing person because I've spent most of my time outside the United States, into the global markets. I started when it was very crazy. I dropped out after Woodstock in 1970. I went to college for a year and didn't want to be there. I didn't find I was learning anything. So I went into the whole world of the alternative world of, the hippie world, and then traveled around the world. It's actually traveled around the world for a number of years and found my direction, found what I really wanted by going overseas, and then proceeded to develop a career based upon those new perspectives, which were mainly Middle Eastern. I grew up in New York as a nice young Jewish boy in a liberal Reform Jewish synagogue. When I was 19 and I had dropped out, my brother and we went off to Europe and then ended up into going off to the Middle East. And our first trip in 1971 was to Lebanon. I went back to college, got my degree in Arabic studies and in Middle Eastern studies and in Islam, studied Islam. And then when I graduated in 1975, I was at State University of New York in Binghamton, upstate New York.
Yeah.
And then I went off to Cairo to go to graduate school, and I studied journalism. And I got a job with NBC News in Cairo. And after 3 months there, in December.
Compared to this, advanced air mobility is a walk in the park, isn't it?
I hope so.
I hope so.
The big concern for the flying car business, of course, is crashing.
Yes.
Is who can certify, absolutely guarantee that it's not going to crash either into another thing, or that the wind, how much wind before it can, each vehicle and can blow it, knock it over.
Where
nobody
it can
seems
fly.
to really know. So
yeah, where it can fly and what conditions and all of that. So tell us a little bit about, what are you doing now exactly?
I'm working as a board member of the Aero company, and we're a unique company in that we want to become what they call a launch distributor. We're going to distribute flying cars. We're going to be a dealership. We don't make them. We're selling them and servicing them and operating them through showrooms. And we're setting up showrooms around, for example, across the United States. We're going to put a showroom in Texas, a showroom in Ohio. We have multiple showrooms being planned in Florida. Florida is our first priority because of the nature of what it is, where it is, who it is, and Florida's commitment to this new technology. So we're going to buy an airport. We're going to own Tampa North, which is a small airport. We're in the process of buying and taking over Tampa North. We'll put in a showroom in there for the dealership. We have several flying cars that are already signed up as to be we'll be their dealers for them, and a bunch more in the process of negotiating with half a dozen more. And believe me, the first showroom that opens is going to be the winner, because everybody's going to want to have their vehicle in it and not wait another year or two before the next showroom opens somewhere else. So I
remember having those conversations with you and Sean and everything, and I thought, what a terrific idea. I mean, when you go and buy a car, when you go and buy an airplane, there usually is some sort of a showroom, not as much with airplanes, but you do go and look, and to be able to actually see one, get inside of one. 2 weeks ago, I was inside of an eHang 216 ES, and it was a great feel. Like I understood it. I was like, I get it. I've been inside of Joby, I've been inside others, and it's you really get a good feel for it, then it becomes more real. So I love your idea of being a showroom of sorts. And by the way, I extend the invitation to you come out here in Savannah, where we've got triple gated communities. We've got Gulfstream right here. We got people flying with their brand spanking new Gulfstream 750s and 650 ZR 700 sorry and 650 ZRs, and they need to get home quicker than driving on the ground. Tell me a little bit about that airport, because I saw
We're,
the
by the
plans.
way, we're in the process of negotiating with 82 airports.
Yeah, good. That's what I want to hear, because that airport you guys are looking into in North Tampa, it is perfect. It has everything you need to. It's close to a community. It's close to shopping centers. It's got enough so that you can build not only the showroom, but also it's got enough for trucks to come in. It's ideal. And it's right on the highway. It's right next to the highway. It's perfect. The location is amazing.
Yeah, and we have a whole network that of flying car vertiports, what they call them vertiports, like heliports for helicopters. These are vertiports for vertical vehicles. We're in the process of negotiating for 82 different airports around and locations around Florida. Many of them are small private airports,
Of
which is
course,
even necessarily
better.
even better. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they want to be in the lead. They want to be the first, not the last.
Yeah,
So
and the
they're
great thing
all
about that is that if it's a private helipad, or in our case, a private multiport, then you have to deal with the DOT. And in one ways, it's a little bit easier, because as soon as it's public, then it's the FAA, and that's much more stringent in terms of. So I think your strategy to go for private places is spot on.
well, we're working both because
Yeah, you have to.
the bigger airports have become what the term, and we use this a lot here. It's called hub and spoke. The hub and the spoke, and the hub are the larger airports, and the spokes are the smaller airports and the private airports. And then the spokes are also the actual destinations where there is no airport as such, but we put a vertiport, whether it's at a hotel or a resort complex, a Disney World, Disneyland. All of them are going to want to have some vehicle facility
Yes,
where you can fly in and out for
absolutely.
tourism, for visitors, for business people, for everyone. And
Yeah.
so it's going to become the spokes are really going to become the key, because
Yes.
everybody's going to want to have these vehicles. For example, I lived for 15 years in the Virgin Islands in St. Croix. I had a condo there, and what a perfect location.
Yes.
You're from your hotel or your condo, you fly right down 10 miles down the beach to the main city or to the resort complex or to the airport. There's no problem with other air traffic crashing into anybody. You're the only one flying it. And because everybody there is rich and has lots of money because they're buying these resort condos, they can
Absolutely.
afford the vehicles and flying with them the way others necessarily can't. So that's a kind of perfect location for setting up the first private and because it's a small island and has a very engaged involved
Yes.
government,
Yes.
they're ready to go ahead with where the FAA and other governments like Florida government may be a little bit more reluctant to give an approval, especially if the
Absolutely.
Virgin Islands says, well, these guys are flying along the coast. There's no one else to crash into. So let's give them a permit. And in fact, they don't need a permit in a situation like that.
Yeah,
They don't even need the
a few
permit.
years ago, we were looking for what are the most ideal places to start networks for all of these eVTOLs, eSTOLs, and everything. And obviously, the ones over water were a perfect one. And then some of the easiest one to think of is actually Indonesia, Philippines, where you have to get that fresh fish, that fresh shellfish down to the city center, and then of course flown all over the world. And of course you're flying over water most of the time. So Hawaii was also another one, a little bit more difficult in Hawaii. Another one we had not too long ago was David Eisen was on the show, and he talked about the importance of all these little islands that they have around there, underserved community. You can get there by diesel boat, but you can also now get there by electric aquaplane or seaplanes. You can also get there by electric hovercraft if you ever could design those things, and they are being designed. So yeah, I think you guys are totally right. That's the right way to go, because we're not going to be flying over New York City, Dallas, or Los Angeles anytime soon. No.
Perfect example, the Bahamas from Florida, from the main I mean, the distance, depending on the distance that that these vehicles can fly. Some of them are only 20 and 30 miles. before they run out of power. Other ones, which means you're going to crash into the ocean because it's 80 miles from the nearest island from Florida to the Bahamas. But if you can go 80 miles, then my goodness, then you can fly to every island around the Bahamas. Point.
And you can, like the Electra, the EL9, that's enough for 9 passengers, and it can definitely go that at night during storms because it's got IFR, it's got de-icing. Not that you would, well, maybe, who knows these days with climate change. And
every
everything.
vehicle will have its own defined market based upon its capabilities, its distance, its passengers.
Yeah, its operational envelope.
Right now, the big ones, the main ones are small. The big ones, the main companies that are actually in the market now, signing contracts or trying to sign contracts. For example, the 2 biggest names in the industry are Joby and Archer. And both of them have either 1, 2, 3 seaters, at most 4 seaters. How many people can you get? What's it going to cost to fly as on a commercial basis, to fly from the airport to an island?
See, this is why we've been looking at eSTOL technology much closer, because something like, and again, the Electra or the Otis doesn't really matter, but once you can shove 9 people to do that same and even further bigger payload, bigger cargo too, by the way, then you can get to the destinations where you can hop on a SkyDrive or something like that. That's perfectly ideally tailored for that. Yeah, it only has 2 passengers, but you know what? It grows. This is the first generation, but you're right. I think we need to get to the 7, 9 seaters on the eVTOL side of things, not just on the eSTOL side of things. And of course, by that time, the eSTOLs will be carrying 15, 19 passengers. And of course, then move up to the 40 segment, 100 seat segment, and so on and so forth. We'll get there.
Two issues there. One is a pilot, because, nobody's going to want to get in a flying car without a pilot, at least initially. No government is going to give permits to a flying car that doesn't have a pilot initially, at least. Until they're proven to be functional. And look, this is the same thing with driving cars now, right?
Yes,
there
same
are
thing, absolutely.
Driverless cars, but they're limited. They're carefully organized as to the distances, the destinations, the management of it. So that's very big. Is the passenger thing. Look, more urgent in the initial phases is cargo, not people.
Absolutely.
Because if it crashes, you lost all your eggs or your tomatoes. So what? I mean, compared to the insurance and the insurance.
Yeah. And if you think about it, by the way, that was the same thing about 15 years ago or more now, actually. It was the same thing in the EV industry. The very first companies who started using EVs were fleet owners, because guess what? Reliably every day it was 40 miles, 60 miles, 80 miles. We got the best data from these guys in terms of charging, in terms of usage, battery wear and tear. And we found out, wow, we can do a lot more with these batteries than we thought we would. And then, of course, as any disruptive technologies out there, VVIP, VIP, of course, military dual use, always part of it. But then you're right, tourism, huge. And then we develop business flying. And then, of course, well, you and I will be able to just go, I want to go there, click on it, and then boom, or tap on it, and then boom.
The first actual commercial markets are not going to be for private passengers.
No,
the first commercial markets are going to be, as I say, initially for cargo, but also for a range of government entities. For example, medical emergencies, first responders, police, security, rescue, storms where power goes out.
Yep.
And there's a whole range and it's all government, which is the better part of, and the value of that is 2 things. One is they don't need permitting, licensing the way private companies do, because it's the government is going to operate it itself.
Absolutely.
So who's it going to ask for permits for? It's asking itself for permission. So that's an easy one.
One of the lowest hanging fruit here.
And also, it's not a profitability. They're not in the business of making money.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
They can spend more than a private company can, and they can earn less. In fact, they're earning nothing.
And they have to, because they're doing it right now with aircraft that are not really well suited for that. So one of the places that we've been working with is, the whole Quebec, Montreal area, where they have very far away communities. They need medical attention. They can't always get a helicopter there. The trains, it kind of work, but it doesn't really get there. So you're right, that middle mile to last mile solution, advanced air mobility, is finally giving birth to that, or making it a reality or potential reality at this stage. We're hoping to have somebody who is coming up with a whole organ carrying a system using drones, because you know what they found out, and I was also talking to Rex Alexander about that, is an organ is very sensitive to vibration, and hence helicopters have a lot of vibration, right? But guess what? Drones don't. And it's easier to muffle that inside of a drone, get it, especially now, by the way, you were talking about pilot training. Well, now, thankfully, the FAA is moving very forward with its Mosaic, where it gives us a little bit a better idea of what the pilot training looks like. But no, we also have BVLOS, where we can finally have an understanding of where we're going with, out of sight line of flight for these drones. Is it perfect? No, of course, we're still, we're still making it, tweaking it as it goes along. So, but you're right. And it's always the same thing. It's the utilitarian part of it that works first, because it happens all the time. It's a recurrent daily thing. We get all the best data from it. And you're right. As soon as the government is involved in terms of, our healthcare and everything, God, that's a loaded word these days. It needs to happen, and profitability is not at the key point. So you're right; those are very good points. And thankfully, I think now you're right to say that, because those are conversations we've been having for years, and now I think it's finally getting into the public psyche that that's where we're going, guys. Cargo first. It's always the same thing: trucks first, cars later.
Yeah. You said something interesting that I just wanted to throw back at. You mentioned Indonesia.
Yes.
Have you been there?
No, I have a lot of friends who are from there, who are part of various AAM companies. And every time we look at that case scenario, and it's just, right now they rely on big diesel boats to get these fresh seafood back to, to the main centers to be then distributed worldwide. But imagine these little drones, imagine eventually these bigger carrying drones or eVTOLs coming right back, and then fresh, done deal. No pollution, can fly at night once they get to the generation 2 that can, IFR kind of flight. But yeah, it's a perfect place. The Philippines too, all of
The
these
reason I
places.
mentioned it is because I lived in Indonesia.
Yeah.
I served
Where
I
about?
served at Jakarta. I served at
In
the U.S.
Jakarta.
Embassy. I was the
Wow.
commercial counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta for 3 years.
Isn't it a perfect place? I mean, it's ideal.
I went there in 1987 until 1990
My gosh.
for 3 years. And before I went, I studied Indonesian for 8 months in intensive language training.
Yeah, interesting language.
Still thinking Bahasa Indonesia.
Yeah, it's
Masih
you know
bisa
what?
bicara bahasa.
You still remember it? All right. I had a friend of mine who was a professor, a mathematics professor, and he said the Indonesians have one of the best mathematics counting system ever on this planet, bar none. I thought that's really interesting. I need to look into that one day and understand why. But he was
I
enamored
loved
with
it.
that.
I had a wonderful time there.
Yeah.
It was a great opportunity.
It's an
Wonderful
amazing
experience.
culture. It's an amazing ancient culture, and I can't wait to get there one of these days. It's on the list of the many places I still haven't gone to.
I have a daughter who is tan Indonesia, made in Indonesia.
Wow, good for you.
New Year's Eve celebration in Bali, in a resort in Bali. And her birth was September 30th, 9 months to the day.
Wow.
So this is pretty indicative.
Same thing here. I was a 9-month, actually shy of 1 day 30.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, that's a great way to kick off flight, especially being in a place like that. It's a gorgeous place out there.
And they loved me because I was young and enthusiastic, and I spoke their language
And you
natively.
spoke the language. How important is
Which
that?
showed serious interest and concern in terms of understanding the value of communication.
Yeah, and it's
thanks to the U.S. government.
Yeah. I wanted to take a small amount of time to talk about how important it is to have our very first sponsor here, AeroAuto, and how much we are so thankful that Sean has decided to help us with this podcast, because we need your help financially to keep on giving you access to very high quality people who speak on this channel about the weather, about the infrastructure side of things, about everything that has anything to do with innovative mobility solutions. And this is why we're so thankful to have AeroAuto as part of our very small niche of people who are backing us financially. This helps us pay for all of our tools, all of our equipment, and of course, to come out there and visit you folks directly to make this podcast a reality. So check out AeroAutoSales.com, and I'm going to spell it out. It's AeroAutosales.com. And the website will explain a little bit more about what the company is doing. Is basically offering you a place where you can see these aircraft up close, where you can get in them and get a sense of what it will be like to fly in them, until one day we can actually fly with them and you can get little demo rides. Now, of course, the sales part in the URLs probably is giving you a bit of a hint that AeroAuto will be able to sell you these aircraft. Fleet operators, fleet management, and individuals, you will be able to buy all of these aircraft through AeroAuto. Not only that, but maintenance too. And so it's really incredible what these guys are working on. It's a lot of long-term, long-distance work that they're doing. They're not sprinters. They're endurance people, like we all are basically in this industry. So go and check them out. And then, well, let's get back to what Charlie has to say. And that's why I wanted to get you on this podcast, because I think your geopolitical understanding, your financial background, your business background internationally, I think is a very important key point to what we were talking about. And of course, I invite you to come back and we can continue talking about these things. Is really what makes the secret sauce, if there is such of a secret sauce for startups. What do you have to get to have a successful startup? And you and I came up with the same conclusion. I mean, there might not be a secret sauce, but there's definitely something you shouldn't do, right? And you and I have witnessed tons of failures, tons of even companies that are still struggling to this day, 20 years later, where you're thinking, this is crazy. They have such an amazing product, service, and everything. And it always reminds me of VHS versus Betamax, right? Betamax clearly the best standard, but VHS won because they had more marketing money, and that's all it was in the end. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk to you over the next 5 minutes or so is considering what you're seeing right now in the advanced air mobility space, all the various startups that we have. Some are well-funded, some are not. Some have all the right people, some don't. How do you see all of this moving around right now, according to how you're experiencing it?
Right. Well, you've actually identified a number of competing factors that are in competition and not necessarily in coordination. So,
Yes, that's true.
well, in terms of money, on one hand, finance and funding, and then the other is, of course, personnel and human resources. Those are the two biggest uncertainties and the ones that cause the most challenge, because
Yeah.
you can put the wrong person in who isn't going to produce the results that you want,
And
and he
we've
hasn't
noticed
got
that, we've
access to
seen
the
that.
right funds.
Yeah, we've seen that firsthand, right? We're not going to name any names, but we saw that in a very good, a great startup had a great idea, get great product, just the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time. That will stall everything. So yeah, it's definitely something to be aware. And by the way, I'm also talking about this because I am writing a book on all that, and I really do hope to have your input on that book, because there's a lot to be said. But anyway, please go on. Tell me what you were going to say.
Well, no, you're right, and that's what I was about to say. Was that it's a complex situation where there are multiple factors, and if you don't go in understanding accurately the priorities of those multiple factors, you could very much either not understand them at all or focus on the wrong ones and not prioritize. So you could focus on people and not on money, or you could focus on the
Yep.
products and the
Yep.
market access, but not the funding,
Yes.
or not the right salespeople, or understanding the competition. Because
Yes.
in many cases, companies go into a market thinking that it's open and ready, and the competition is not necessarily there. The alternative is the opposite, where the competition is really deep, and you can go in there, but you can beat them because you have something that they don't have, or that's better, or that's a new technology.
And you open up also another thing here too, is to show the complexity of these new kind of markets and these new kind of segments like advanced air mobility and everything, where you have a dichotomy between, there's a push for a technological push, right? That kind of aircraft in that kind of market doesn't exist, right? But there's also another push right now that I'm seeing more and more, and that's the untapped or unvocalized human demand on service, right? There are a lot of places where I think we agree on this, where there is actually, it makes more sense to develop what we call vertiport networks, multi-port networks, where not necessarily it's going to be in New York City or in Atlanta or in LAX, although there is the demand there, but all the other places where the demand hasn't been formulated yet, because you got a car, you may have a train, but mostly you have airplanes to get to. And so we're sort of showing that, hey, there's also that middle to last mile solution in the form of eVTOLs, eSTOLs, and even eCTOLs when they get around to it, that happens. So you're right. We can drill down really, really far with that one.
But that's more of a secondary market, not the primary one, not the
Yep.
initial one. The initial ones are going to be more visible, and central to the situation.
Absolutely, especially down there in Florida. You're right. Florida is a great place for that. There's a condensed population, not a lot of empty space, but you still have to drive very far away to get from one side to the other. My gosh, just go from Miami to St. Petersburg. I mean, that's a long drive in the middle of nowhere, right? And flight over that is what, maybe 15 minutes at most, not even that. And it's pretty much achievable with almost any eVTOL that we have these days.
Yeah. The market is definitely Florida, California initially. Although I think that New York and Washington are moving aggressively to put up, for
Yeah,
example, from Manhattan, from the East
yeah,
River, 36th Street, from the Vertiport there all the way to the Kennedy Airport. That's
yeah.
going to be open in a year from now.
Yeah, so so with that, I think, yeah, you're right. I think we'll always have, demos and prototypes. That will always work. The only problem with that there are a lot of problems with that, right? You're flying overhead, a lot of houses and everything. Again, certification needs to prove that this is, to the billionth very safe. Another thing that we don't always talk about, to me, that's a very dear and near subject, is what about the energy use? I mean, Manhattan is not the newest island in terms of infrastructure. Just look at the metro is definitely the subway is a good example of the infrastructure crumbling, but how much energy we need to have. And unless we start to bring
The big challenge is charging the batteries, because
charging the
they're all
batteries,
going to be
where
they're
are
all
we
going to be
going to get
battery
that?
operated.
And the only way you can get it right now would be to actually have a big cable go under the Hudson and just pump all of that energy from where you have a little bit more space on the other side in New Jersey. Or for some reason, they managed to buy a $20-30 million micro nuclear reactor. And there are plenty of solutions out there. There are ways of, running ammonium and hydrogen turbines to have, all the electricity you need without the SOx and NOx and horrible
Well,
emissions that
the
you
big
need
hope
to.
is solar. The big hope is solar, because all the other one, if
Eh,
you're burning ammonium, then you're still burning something. You're still
No, but
polluting.
but if you burn it with hydrogen, you're not burning anything at all. The problem with solar, and that's something that we've talked a lot about in our master classes, you can't have solar panels next to a landing space because you will have glare, you will have reflection. No matter how automated these things are, that's just one thing you don't want to. And same thing with wind turbines. You have a lot of vortices, and you just don't want to have that anywhere 4 miles around. It's just not a really good solution. However, why not have it on the New Jersey side and then shunt that electricity over? Now that's a really great point. And a lot of buildings I know are going to have to start to put a lot of solar panels even on the side of the buildings. So there's a lot of problems that we're going to be encountering very soon, and I just love it. It's like an onion layer. It's like every time we peel one, it's like yay, and then you look at it, you're like, there's another problem there. Yay, there's another problem there.
The
Love
good
it.
news is the good news about all this is that the degree of uncertainty is great, but
Yes.
the capability of technology is great and growing every day.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what battery they're going to put in today will certainly not be the battery they're putting in there a year or two from now.
No.
I mean, look
No.
at what
No.
AI is transforming all of our technology world.
Absolutely. I was chairing the eVTOL Show USA session in Palo Alto 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about ceramics, lithium ceramics, which I wasn't very familiar with. But
Mhm.
this guy was saying, you know what? In theory, we can push 2,500 kilowatt hour. Now, just to give you an idea of what that means, this is transcontinental flights in pure battery electric aircraft, right? So of course, that's in a lab, that's a very different thing to actually produce this by the millions. But it means that now we're testing the 500 to 600 kilowatt hour cells out there in the wild, not packs, but cells. Okay, so we're getting there. But my gosh, can you imagine once we get to 2,500 kilowatt hour? That's it. We can even start to think about, New York to Ireland or Boston to Ireland. We're getting close there. We're getting there. I think before you and I are on a wheelchair, we will see these things happening.
The biggest problem, though, is the degree of uncertainty, because investors, they want to have some degree of
Uh,
security, of knowledge, of assurance that what they're investing in is going to
yes.
happen in the way it's
So
supposed to.
that's one thing that drives me really crazy, because what we saw in the very first few years of, back then we called it UAM, it wasn't called AAM. The very first investors were absolutely not industry savvy. They didn't understand anything about that. They were more like Silicon Valley people, where within 6 months you start to look for profits, right? And they started drilling all of these first companies that got very well funded, but it left a really bad taste for the rest of the industry, because nobody wanted to invest anymore. Because guess what? This is aviation, guys. And aviation stipulates always the same thing: a decade, $1 billion, and 1,000 engineers. Now, we kind of shrink down the time, not the money, but it still takes a
Divide
long
everything by
time.
10.
Everything by 10.
Everything.
So, but the good news is now, and I don't know if you can confirm this on your side, but I'm starting to see a lot more business savvy, or a lot more industry savvy investors coming back, namely those who have already invested in aerospace and know that it is a long endeavor. It's a decade before you start to see any profits. And it's always, part of a good portfolio. You've got short ROIs, and you've got longer term ROIs. You can't just go
which
only
is
one
where
way
the
or
whole
the
issue of
other.
which is where the whole issue of risk management is really
Absolutely.
critical in terms of making
Absolutely.
those decisions. So for the risk for a small investor is very different than it is for Boeing
Absolutely.
or
Absolutely.
Lockheed. And $100 million from you or me compared to $100 million from Boeing is a very different world. So the big players are still in a very strong position because the risk for them is much reduced in
And
terms of
and if I
the
was
potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was in their situation, where they were looking at Lockheed, and anybody, Boeing, Airbus, it doesn't really matter. I would play my cards slowly, hedge my bets. Give it a little bit here, give it a little bit there, work on that project over here, but don't push the needle. However, what I'm finding that it's happening is at the tier 2 level. I'm talking about Textron. I'm talking about all these guys. These guys have been moving intelligently. Diamond's been investing into. And so these guys, I can't wait to see what they do. Sadly, what is lacking so far is, the big three on the corporate jet, the business jets, right? Dassault, Bombardier, and Gulfstream. None of them are doing anything much. I suspect, not sure, that Bombardier is actually working on something. I mean, their blended wind system is interesting. It just has a lot of teething problems. You can't really make the airplane bigger and carry more, but that's something that, they'll figure it out. But maybe Bombardier might be the next one. But I'm seeing that, Textron made all the right buys, all the right move, even though they throttled back right now. A lot of these other guys right there that have the crown market on these airplanes and these aircraft, they're going to surprise us, hopefully in the very near future.
One of the bigger issues for that is the regulatory licensing and approval, and
Oh,
FAA and state flying aviation authorities, whether it's Aviation Authority of Florida or of Tampa or of the federal FAA itself. And so you have 3 layers effectively of independent management, administration,
yes.
and government.
Yeah.
So you have the federal, you have the state, and then you have your county, local.
Yes. And you're right, because we work also in Europe, we work in the Middle East and in Asia, and so everybody is always a little different. But I always have a great time when I go and give talks internationally, because I tell them about, oh, you think you have a complex system. You have Eurocontrol and EASA in Europe. You have GAC in the Emirates. That's wonderful. Guess what we have? We have the DOT for private flying. We have the FAA for public flying. By the way, both work together. You have to work with both together. Then we have the federal government. Then we have the state level. Then you have the county, municipality, so on and so forth. We deal with such an exponentially more complicated terrain than you guys do. There's just not one single thing that goes down.
Some places have eliminated or reduced
Yes.
most of that overlap. The
Thank
Emirates, for example, UAE, United Arab Emirates is an example. They already signed a contract with Joby, with their Archer. They already have Vertiport, Skyports.
Yeah.
They're already going ahead with it. Fascinating, because they have ruling families who can make decisions, and there's nobody voting for anybody, and
Right.
there's nobody getting elected.
So
they can decide whatever they want. And they can take. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're
It
right.
could take
There's two reasons why it works really well out there. Is anything under 500 feet, you can fly. Anything over there, military space, right? And you're right. The ruling family says, "I want this," and then people do it. What's not being told between you and me is a lot of these regulatory body people. When you finally have good conversations with them outside of microphones and all, and we asked them and said, that's amazing. How are you guys going to do it? And they kind of look at us going, well, we don't really know yet, but they want it to happen, so it will have to happen. And I love this. It was really beautiful. One of the best conversations I've had, especially with the GAC it was actually in Dubai, and it was about how their philosophy is very simple. In the world of regulatory bodies, there's really two bodies that you look at: the U.S. Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA, and then the European EASA that does more or less the same thing, a little bit more, but anyway, more or less. These guys are really writing the book, right? And they're saying, we're sort of in the middle of these two huge spheres of influence. We will kind of lean towards EASA, but we have this right in between their envelope where we operate. So we take the best from both of these
and
worlds.
they're much higher risk
Yeah.
than most other places. I'll give you a classic example. When Emirates Airlines started in Dubai, they started out with 2 Airbuses, and then they came and started buying. I was a commercial counselor at the embassy in Abu Dhabi, and so we were very upset that they were
Of
initially
course.
first airplanes were from France and not
Yep.
from Americans.
Airbus
So they said,
300s,
okay,
yeah, I think.
A300. So then the next 30 aircraft were Boeings.
Boom.
So now here's another one. When they first started, they didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and so they took a great degree of risk. So the first Airbus A380 that was commercially sold and flown was not flown by Emirates.
No.
It was flown by Singapore Air.
Yeah, it was Singapore that was one of the launch partners.
But the next 30 were Emirates.
With Emirates.
So we went to the Emirates management and we said, why did you let Singapore be the first to fly it? They got all the publicity. And you know what the answer was? We were afraid it might crash, and we didn't want to be the ones that it crashed on. As soon as we knew it wasn't going to crash, then we bought them all, and we put Singapore out of business.
Yes,
so Singapore bought the first one and got all the publicity and succeeded. Thank goodness it didn't crash.
Yeah,
but the next 30 were all for Emirates and the UAE. So that's their attitude: is we don't want to take the highest degree of risk, but managed risk. We're ready to take it to the extent that necessary, all the way.
I think Tim Clark is one of the best CEOs I've ever seen in terms of airlines. There's a lot of things to not like about modern airlines, the way they treat you and everything. But boy, Tim Clark is great because you're right. They've been really big. They're very close to Boeing, but with all the problems that Boeing's been having the last 20 years, they were very critical. And they said, no, absolutely not. We're going to Airbus. They did go to Airbus. And now they're starting to talk about the 777X, which is pretty amazing. I thought, well, that's if Tim Clark says yes, then I'm like, okay, I will fly it. They're still not flying 737 Maxes, which is like, okay, that's interesting. We'll see when they get to that point eventually. Right. But Qatar is flying 737 Maxes too. So there's Tim Clark is I always laugh when I see him speak because he has no problem mincing words. He just says it straight out, calls them straight out, and rightfully so. He knows exactly.
My daughter lives in Doha, Qatar. And my wife just flew back. My wife just flew back from there 2 days ago.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah, it's
my daughter works in the Islamic Art Museum as a curator.
Wow, excellent. Charlie, tell me a little bit about. Now we usually get into the more, who are you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gives you that motivation to work in this crazy industry after everything that you've been through? And you definitely have been through a lot. You have a lot to offer. But what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, 2 things. One is legacy. I've written a memoir. The State Department did a 10-hour interview with me and hundreds of pages, and it's been being published. I'm editing it now. I've got a 12-episode Netflix series that I'm drafting because I haven't even mentioned this, but I was the most attacked and terrified American diplomat by the Islamic fanatics. Osama bin Laden sent a team to kidnap me.
Charlie, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And I think that there's so many stories I want to ask you, so many things I want to hear from you. Definitely, please come back here. And then just a special message to our listeners and watch you people who are watching us right now. This has been a sponsored podcast from AeroAuto, and I'm very excited about it because it's our first sponsor that we had already about 7 months into our podcast. So very privileged to have you here with us today. And again, for those of you who have been listening or watching, what do you walk away from having heard everything that you have heard today, and knowing that there is a paid version on Patreon where you can access Charlie's incredible wealth of information and, my gosh, experiences and background? What have you learned about advanced air mobility that you may or may not have known before? And what would you think needs to happen too? And this is our call to action for y'all. And please like, share, subscribe, tell us what you think. And well, we look forward to having Charlie back again next time with us, because that's the one thing I've noticed with Charlie is we always have plenty of things to talk about. And I love his experience that he brings into advanced air mobility, because most of the time it's that external experience that enriches what we do deep down in the trenches here. So Charlie, thank you very much for taking the time for being with us today.
Thank you for giving me the channel to operate and to be part of your program. It's really very great honor.
Likewise, my friend. Likewise, my friend. And we'll see you very soon again. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Well, there you go. You heard from our very first sponsor. Hopefully this was exciting and interactive enough for you. I know how some people, don't always like to have advertising, but in our case, it's very important to have advertising, to have sponsors like AeroAuto that really help us define the brand, help us understand what's happening in the world of advanced air mobility. And Charlie is a really good representative of this industry, where his background, his extremely rich background in geopolitical affairs, in also representing the business, that we have abroad, the US that we have abroad, defending its interests abroad, is really important, makes him such a key player with Aero Auto and the industry as a whole. His insights are extremely valuable. I always love talking to Charlie because it always like lasts forever. And instead of making this a two-part series like I had originally thought, I thought it might be better to give you the condensed version right here on Buzzsprout and YouTube, but also the bigger, longer, unedited version on Patreon, where you can actually, hey, chip in, give us, buy us a coffee, as they say, helps us get all the memberships going, the dues going for all of our distribution platforms and all. And again, we look forward to you sharing this podcast with other people who may be interested in innovative mobility solutions. Continue liking, continue subscribing. We're at about a 930 downloads, which is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you all for doing this. And I think we are within reach of 1,000 downloads before the end of the year. And I can't tell you how excited I am. I can't tell you how thank you. I want to tell you for making electric, the ways we move, a reality. Electric air mobility is in my company, and sometimes I kind of lump them all together. But anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week for something very different. But we'll come back and have 3 more people from Aero Auto until the end of the year, and you can see a little bit more about what the company is doing. It's very innovative, and we wish them all the success in the world that they deserve. See you next week.